On day 17 of the Delphi double murder trial, the defense wrapped its case. Jury instructions were ironed out. Neither side raised any objections. The prosecution called rebuttal witnesses, leading to a short break while the court waited for one of them to arrive. Now, with both cases presented, Thursday's set for closing arguments, where each side will get about 2 hours to make their final pitches before it goes to the jury. Let's bring in legal analyst Karen Conti to weigh in on the case. And Karen, I know you've been following this case pretty closely. Let's get into the defense testimony, because the last several days they've had witnesses, including psychiatrists, forensic experts, videos of Allen in prison as well. Do you think they did enough to poke holes in the state's case?
They sure have. I really do believe that. In fact, one of the most important pieces that I saw was there was an expert who said that the girl's phone had been plugged in with a headphone for 5 hours after they went missing, which goes in the face of what the prosecution's timeline shows. It shows then that perhaps the girls were abducted in one place, brought to another place, and then their bodies were left at yet another place. So just that alone really disrupts the prosecution's view, and also the testimony about the psychotic nature of some of the confessions that the defendant apparently made while incarcerated.
Yeah, let's talk more about that, because he reportedly confessed 60 times. His defense team called a psychiatrist to testify that being held in solitary confinement could have caused Richard Allen to be delusional. How believable was that testimony, you think, for the jury?
To lawyers who do this kind of work and who spend time in the prison, it's very believable. In fact, the UN said that 15 days in solitary confinement constitutes torture under international law. This guy was in solitary for 13 months, and it can result in some cases with people being delusional and people going into a psychotic episode. Again, will the jurors understand that? Will the jurors believe the testimony of the psychiatrist? That's a big question.
How strong has the prosecution's evidence been throughout this trial? I know they've had the unspent bullet, the confessions that we mentioned. What do you think will be their strongest points heading into closing arguments?
Front and center are the confessions, because I think the average person thinks, why would you confess once, let alone 60 times when you're incarcerated and you know your calls are being recorded? That to me is front and center. Second is that bullet. And that bullet, according to the experts that the prosecution called, ties the defendant to that weapon, even though that weapon was not used at the crime scene. And also, remember, we have that video from the girl's phone that they're going to get to look at and see if that looks like him, and it does look like him. There were police sketches that resembled him, and there was also the voice part of the phone message that has now been compared with the defendant. So all of those together, I think, can be very compelling.
What do you expect the defense to focus on in their closing arguments?
Well, I think they're going to focus on the time that has transpired between the murders and when this guy was caught, because it's 5 years. And I'm telling you, this is a small town, less than 3,000 people. It's really hard to imagine that the prosecution and the police did not know who this guy was in a town of so few people. Hearing his voice, seeing a picture of him and what he was wearing, knowing that he was walking around in this area. So I would argue as a defense lawyer, hey, you know what, if the prosecution and police had reasonable doubt for 5 years, you too should have reasonable doubt.
Hey, Karen, not many people are aware of this, but in Indiana, jurors are permitted to ask the witnesses questions. How helpful is that to both sides, and what do you make of the questions that they have asked so far in this case?
It's a very interesting thing, and a lot of courts will debate whether or not they should do that. I think it's excellent, because the jurors can be sitting there for days and weeks and months in some cases, not understanding what's going on. And I think their ability to ask questions will help both the prosecution and the defense in crafting their testimony to clarify for the jury what they need to decide. It also helps the judge to understand, you know, what the concerns are. So the questions were really directed at the defense witnesses, questioning why they didn't do certain things, why they didn't come up with a report, why they didn't do certain tests. So it seems to me that they were being a little critical of the defense witnesses.
Karen Conti, always good to speak with you and get your perspective and your analysis of testimony and everything that's going on in the trial. Appreciate your time as always.
All right, T.